Oftentimes people ask me about getting out at night and seeing shows or going to restaurants or seeing the nightlife. And depending on where you are, but in this case, 15 hours ahead means I'm working overnight. So I don't usually go out at night unless it's a weekend, but I often am traveling on the weekend, so I don't often get out. But I will be prepared and get sleep and so on in advance. And then just knowing that the nightlife isn't going to be part of that equation. You have to be okay with that, because first and foremost, you're here to work. You're not here as a tourist. If you work remotely around the world and you are asynchronous, meaning you can work anywhere at any time, that's a really good thing, because then you can set your hours. A lot of folks are like YouTubers or other folks like that. They can set their own hours. But if you're working for a specific time zone, like I do, Pacific time in North America, then I'm having to alter my hours when I'm here, say at Michigan City, which is 14 hours ahead, to that Pacific time. And that means I work overnights. And that's something you have to be prepared for if you want to do remote work. When you're working remotely and working in a different time zone, it's always good to have supplies with you so that you can have food while you're working it, usually in the evening. So if you're an Airbnb, you can go to a grocery store, get groceries, or you can go to a restaurant, get takeout. The cool thing is that if you get some really good food places, you can bring that back with you. You have that in your room or in your Airbnb. One of the things you have to think about when you're traveling remote and working on a different time zone is trying to get enough rest and planning your days ahead. So for this trip that I've been in Southeast Asia, where I'm 14 and then 15 hours ahead, I make a point each day of getting rest in the afternoon for a couple of hours. It doesn't mean that by the time 3 a.m. rolls around that it's going to be different or you're not going to feel tired. One thing that's always important when you're doing remote work is get proper sleep. Make sure you get sleep at different times, but it's rare that you get a full 8 hours sleep unless it's a weekend. But during the week, you're going to have to find shifts where you're getting 2-3 hours at a time. So be prepared. Now, the thing about managing your time when you're doing remote work is that if you're using a platform such as Clockify, it's going to put you into your existing time zone, meaning where you are at. In this case, I'm in Singapore. And so trying to match that to the day, usually the day before, to where you were, just work as if it's that day. You don't have to worry about it. But another thing is when you're scheduling in Sprout, it'll keep Pacific time. So you can schedule it, but it's going to show you when those posts are scheduled in the time zone you're at. So there's always a discrepancy. So you have to be acutely aware of the fact that there's always going to be discrepancies and double check that, because you never want a post coming out too early or too late. It's always good to think about taking rest days, especially when you're working and you've got a lot going on. You're not going to be able to get out every day and see all the sights. If you've booked enough time in a place, say you're there a week, then you should plan at least having one rest day where you're not going out, feeling obligated to get out and see the sights. Now, granted, if you're only in a place for 2 or 3 days, then you want to maximize that. But where you have the opportunity to rest, just do, really recharge your batteries. And if you have work to do in terms of working on reports or getting caught up, think about keeping that in the schedule. And that way you have a better opportunity to stay grounded, as opposed to feeling like you're on the adrenaline of having tourism all the time. When traveling, it's a good idea to not only have your debit and credit cards, a Visa, MasterCard, or American Express, but also bring US dollars, specifically $100 bills. If you have the budget to do it, it's good to have at least 500, depends on how long you're going to be staying. Say you're for a week, then bring at least 300 US in $100 notes, because you can then cash that in and get some, or exchange that for cash, which they may not do in an ATM, may not work. So it's always good to have that as a backup. Oftentimes when you're traveling, you have to think about currency. In Vietnam, cash is king, so you're using the Vietnam dong, and you get quite a bit of value for your money. So in US dollars, $100 would take you a whole week buying groceries, going to restaurants. It basically was more than enough. Whereas here in Singapore, what would cost $8 to $10 if you went to the store to buy some supplies like drinks and stuff, cost you $8-10. In Vietnam, costs you almost 40 here. So be prepared for that on your budget. Transportation while you're traveling in terms of cabs and Ubers and Grabs are something that if you plan ahead as much as you can, then you're going to make life fairly easy. I've mentioned before that when you get to the airport, you can grab a Welcome or a Grab or Uber, depending on where you are in the world. And if you have that booked in advance, then they'll come meet you at the airport and pick you up and take you to your hotel. And that's super convenient and worth it. And it solves the hassle of trying to find a ride, once you arrive. But the other thing too is while you're in a city, if they have Uber, if they have Grab and your credit card works, here in Penang it doesn't, then yeah, it's great just to order those up. You don't have to deal with bartering with them. It's a flat rate, makes it easy. So always be prepared for that. The more conveniences you can build in to your trip, the easier it's going to be. Doesn't mean everything's going to be smooth, but at least you can try and plan it to be as smooth as possible. When you travel out of town, it's good to know the transit system. So a lot of big cities, they have subways. That's always great to get around by subways. Convenient, super cool. You can also find good Airbnbs that are just a little outside the city center, but if they're on a subway line, you can get a great deal. And of course, it's just minutes into the city. If we know places like here, Penang, they just have a bus system. It's actually not that bad. I got on the bus this morning to come out to Penang Hill. It took about 35 minutes to get here, but it was a nice little tour. So if you have time, it's good. Well, this is the departures area. As you can see, hopefully extremely busy Friday afternoon. They're just hopping right now, and it's hard to keep up with all the congestion and just people everywhere. And I'm about to get an Uber because they do have Uber, but I think it's going to be a long time before I get one because they may be in short supply based on how busy it is, or maybe in short supply because there's no demand. We'll see. This is the slowest airport I've ever been to by far. That's pretty funny. One of the things that I really appreciate about international travel, is signing up for Priority Pass, which gets you into the lounges all over the world. And you get food, you get some beer, some drinks, and it's a nice place to sit down and work. I've been now to, I think, 10 or 12 of these across the world. And in addition to when I'm in business class, I get to the airline one, but these are private lounges that you sign up for. And can't emphasize more than enough that if you're doing international travel and you're in economy, you can still get this at a reasonably good price, probably about $185. That's for 10 visits across the year. Anything above and beyond that's like $30. It's totally worth it. Just coming to these places, checking in, you don't have to pay for anything. You just sit down and relax. It's great. So it's like a refuge, and it's just quiet and cool. Really happy to be here at the Transit Ambassador Lounge in Singapore. Having some food, and then I got to get down to some work before I got on my plane.